people to get into this gathering, celebrating the Lord Jesus Christ and glorifying the Lord.
So that's the question. What is the...
Yeah, so why do we find ourselves getting branches and building boundaries? Like some of the house churches groups that I've been following are very, very strict on religious people, and even the language that they use is as if they started with the house churches from the one group. It's as if they were not in these religious institutions before. One of the things that my mother challenges me is that if you know the truth, please share the truth with everyone and don't limit it to anyone. Everybody needs to hear the truth. The part of choosing comes along with the Lord. The Lord has to speak to them, just like the way maybe He spoke to those of the people that were in the traditional churches, and direct them and clearly show them love. Right? But the challenge is me to see such and get into the scripture that says, I saw all the nations come and all the tribes and the languages. And the question is, where did these people come from? How did they manage to get to this place?
So you're saying, since the majority of people worship in traditional type settings, how do they get from there? What, I mean, I think, you know, the people worshiping in that setting are those who are saved. And you can be saved in a traditional setting. I mean, you can have true, I think you can have true salvation. You just, you know, not doing everything you could be doing for the kingdom of God, but it doesn't have to do anything, I don't think, with your salvation. Because if your salvation is true, whether you're in a house church or a traditional church, your salvation is still there. So in the end, you would be doing the worshiping thing. You just aren't as effective here on earth as you could be, because you're stuck in whatever that model is. That's kind of what I'm thinking. I don't know.
Yeah, but I think the traditional church, my thinking, the traditional church is not, and I stand to be corrected because I'm gonna be controversial. I know. It's not necessarily wrong. Necessarily, I'm not saying it is right. If it follows within the principles of the kingdom. I'll give an example. So assuming we go and we gather, we just agree that what we are doing as a traditional church is not the church, but it is the celebration. There's this pastor in Nairobi, Pastor John Doe or something. I don't know the name, Pastor. I'm forgetting it. The pastor was running Lighthouse Church, and he was telling us about how one day a lady goes to yes, and goes to the office, and he's telling the lady about all this, all that, all that. We've been here and she said, yeah, I know. I've been here for 3 years. I don't have a prayer request or anything. I'm not new. I've been here for 3 years. I just wanted to come and say hi to you, and just because it's been hard to meet you. And that kind of challenged her, that she has people that he doesn't even know, and that are even really just trying to reach to him. And so he broke the church into cells. And so they were doing the house church, 11 people maximum. If you reach 11, you start another house church with the first that came. And the numbers even grew bigger than, he had like a very big church. They would fill stadiums every Sunday. But what they did is they never like I think there was still the meetings, but they agreed that that's kind of a celebration. So where all house churches come and they celebrate
Yeah.
and they network and they get encouraged and they get built up and they can eat if it's food, they can sing, and it is organized. So I feel like that still does what traditional church does in a way, but now they have redefined it so that the people know that the most important thing is that cell. Now I've seen many traditional churches do cells, house cells, and so you'd find like maybe it's PCA or even Catholic, they have Ujama. So they have Wednesdays, they would meet and have a house church. So within that context, they are still meeting the house church principle, and they are multiplying their house churches that increases the celebration. You get it? So somebody can be born again in the traditional church, and somebody can still win souls, somebody can still live. For me, I don't think that the house church necessarily presents everyone as perfectly born again, because some people can also be in the house church and they are not meeting those, so that's my take, that this understanding needs to be given out there, and then the transition could be gradual, but what we will have could be a hybrid of both.
I want to ask, maybe I don't know. What I understand is house churches, everybody is required to go and get another person. And cells, or is it who said that meeting in the house does not make that a house church?
Yeah, it's true. That's it.
So having a big church and be split and have people meet in different groups, is it bringing in more new ones? Or what's the difference between house churches and cell?
What's the difference between house churches and cell groups?
I think maybe part of correct me if I'm wrong, the part of the difference is the goal of having house church versus traditional church versus whatever sales is what is the focus. Like house church, the focus is discipling the nations, preparing people to go out and disciple the nations, where at least traditional churches I've been in, that isn't the focus per se, that it's more, places I've been has been more focused on programs and things to help the membership, the people who are there, to live a good life, basically. And then do a few little outreach things to kind of come back and say, we did this for our community. But the goal, ultimate goal, has not been discipling the nations. I mean, that's kind of what I see the difference with house church and like traditional. Now, I'm not really familiar with cell groups so much as to, I mean, unless we had, what did we call ourselves? It wasn't cell groups. We had, I don't know, it was by region of where you lived. And basically it was just social time. We would get together periodically and have food and fellowship. But it wasn't really beyond that. So I don't know if that's a cell group.
just a small unit of the main church.
Okay, yeah, so,
So it could be regional, it could be gender, it could be age,
Yeah.
it could be even racial, like the black community, white community. For me, I think the first difference would just be semantics. Otherwise, from my experience also with the the house church we had here yesterday, and the house churches I've attended, and I feel program is man's way of organizing himself. So even yesterday I could feel there's a program, but it is not like it takes toll over the objective. But there was still you knew you would do Holy Communion. So we just didn't come and then somebody out of nowhere just says, oh, let me pour water. We'll be like, what are you doing? Eat that bread. And after this, he did this, and we're like, okay. Or maybe if he just woke up and started reading and giving us bread, we'll be like, is that part of what we had agreed to do?
right.
Yeah, so then still, whatever we did still is a program. When you ask me, are you comfortable to do this? When we know what Peggy is doing, and we know what Moha is doing, and nothing seems out of place. Nobody just started dancing on the table and say, it's a house church, freedom, be who you are, do you, So, and that is what still happens in the church setting. I think there is this feeling by the house church that when it's done by a bigger number there, and it's done in a more like what looks like it's really rigid, that's different. But in reality, it's just raving. In reality, I think the principle that if I learned any principle of house church is the principle of practical relationship and fellowship. Such that if we are 1,000, we can't have it. But if we are 10, we can have it. So that we deviate from the argument of programs. Because I think even in my own family, there's a program. We just don't have it written. But in our minds, we just know you can't start cooking ugali in the morning. Yeah. We just know you'll cook tea. And then we just know that there are no phones on dining table. So we've created a program, but we still retain the practical fellowship of a family. You get. So the program is not the problem from my point of view. God is a God of order. He's not an author of confusion. Even Jesus' ministry had order, it had a program. And now they had the heavenly program that through our natural minds, we can put in books, order it as recreation, fall of man, flood. We can almost order it. We even order salvation, order salutis, like we can say we know adoption is the last or whatever, so we know there is regeneration, we know there is justification, we know there is this, and we can organize it. So then there isn't a problem with me. There isn't a problem with program. If you ask me, there isn't any problem with me, for me, and I stand to be corrected because I'm in a class, with meeting somewhere. Because if the practical objective of a house church is practical relationship, then I don't have a problem meeting my house church in a coffee shop. I don't have a problem saying, where are you, Kitengela, and you at the river, and you, because like for me, I stay far. And when I call my friends, they are staying in Kitengela, at the river, Embakasi, and then I'm the one on the far end of Kilimani. And so I'm like, okay, let's just do house church. Let's meet at Mlolongo. There's Java Coffee there. And then we go and tell the Java Coffee, we would love to have that space. Is it okay? Yes. Okay, give us coffee. Somebody says, oh, I'll buy the croissants. Oh, I'll get the, and then we just do what happens in a house church. So then that means for me, house church is not just about meeting in the houses. It's not the physical place. Because if we do that, then we won't have a difference. We've created another law. And then it won't be, they will also be saying, oh, so you see, they say we shouldn't meet in a hall, but they're also saying you must meet in a house. So it's not about Jesus, it's about Jesus, but in a house. You know, because if the centrality of everything is Christ, then it has to be where 2 or 3 are gathered. And that could be anywhere. We could meet in the market where women are selling things, and then we say, after selling your things, you'll be so tired, we don't want you to go home direct. Let's meet for an hour. Have our house church before you go home. You know, yeah.
And that was Jesus' model.
I was just thinking, we really condemned the structures, the buildings, and yet we want a building where we will not be rained on, and we will not be cold, you know, we won't have sun on us. We've been going to the Maasai place, you know, the house, I think you saw the pictures. The huts, the space is so small. And one of my Fadila, she asked, why don't we just put a little, like a shed outside? Because you can't accommodate 10 people in those little huts. And actually, we normally sit outside under a tree. So what happens if it rains?
You get wet.
You get wet. If it's too hot.
You can't have.
So we, as much as we don't want the buildings and structures, we need them. And when we go, even when you look for a man of peace, you look for a man who is able to accommodate
a house.
you, who can accommodate you and give you food.
Or
so I think that should be redefined. On the other hand, the emphasis on this other traditional way of doing it is that let us buy a plot. Like when we went there, they're asking us, can we get a plot and we start putting a building? So so you look for a plot, you start building before we now even talk of. So the focus again now goes to this building. And it takes time and a lot of money. So I don't know how that balance is going to be acquired. Because we can't pretend that we don't need buildings. We do.
You need to have somewhere, because if you've got people, they need to use the bathroom or whatever.
Yeah.
So you need some kind of...
I mean, we go to the bushes there.
So you have to choose a place with bushes.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
And then of course, I think also it is contextual. it has also to be very... it has to be very contextual, because I think me running an intergenerational ministry where like the ministry cuts across the old, the young, and then Africa being overly young with a median age of 19 years, it means that you are really going to be working with a lot of agile people, very active, very innovative, and very mobile, because they are young. They need to meet somebody in El Kitale, then in the evening they are meeting somebody in Eldoret, and then they'll come back. So what our ministry has learned to do is to build an innovative fellowship around that, that movement. They are Facebook generation. They don't read chapters. They are Twitter generation. They read 3 sentences. And I don't mean they don't read. If you ask Emmanuel or me, at the end of the day, I did one day a survey, and I realized I have like for example, I have all these messages, and if you look at it, they are short, but in the end of the day, you've read a literally book. Because people say, oh, this generation doesn't read. But imagine you go to Nation newspaper, Trump to be impeached, and you already know Trump is going to be the first president to be. You don't need 30 pages to introduce what is impeachment, who is Trump, then he's gonna be impeached. Then you move again, you realize, oh, Uganda's president, oh, Facebook locked Uganda president messages, oh, this and that. So at the end of the day, they are so informed in small things that if you add its paragraphs and books, if you sit with your mom or grandma who is reading a book, she's reading a thematic book. So for her, if she's reading Farm Foundation, everything she'll be talking about is Farm Foundation. Oh, there is this. But you can go to Farm Foundation tweet and find what they're tweeting every day, and you have one. You go to CNN, you are even informing your grandma, like, hey, wait, do you know that President this and that and that will leave on 20th when Biden, like, where did you know that?
Yeah.
You already know it from small tweets. Cumulatively, you have so much information, so you have to, if you're building a house church, you have to be on that pace too. I remember one time I went to a fellowship and they asked me, is it wrong to listen to secular music? And by then I was also very traditional religion, so I said it's wrong to do traditional church, it's wrong to do alcohol, it's wrong, like the legal Adventist mind is what I knew. So one of the ladies wrote an email and he just took the songs by Eminem, Dear Mama, and he took all the lyrics and pasted on the email and said, hey, I was just thinking of write my mom something from the heart. I just wanted you to read it and tell me if this is alright. And then I was reading it and I'm like, oh, sounds good to me. I mean, yeah, sounds good to me a bit. Oh man, thank you for opening your heart. This is awesome. Your mom is gonna like it. And then she just smiled me back and said, oh, so if I put this in a song, what changes? At what point does it become evil? Or so I was like, you can sing to your mom if you want, that's okay. And she said, oh, sorry sir, but that's Eminem's song. And I'm like, okay, I had already said Eminem is wicked and you shouldn't. So I had to start creating a theology around it's not the message of secular message, but the person. And so it was confusing. So you need to know that we are working with a generation that will go back, like the Bereans. They will say, let's sit here now. What's the difference between a house church and a traditional church? Then they'll put it. And if you put house, space, whatever, as some of these, they will challenge it. That is why I was insisting yesterday on the word practical fellowship. Because then you can't achieve that if it's a bigger number, and you can't achieve that if you have to travel. Now for us in our ministry, we say, if you have to travel 50 shillings, that's not discipleship. If you have to travel where you have to ask us for money for you to go disciple, that's not discipleship. So we are saying, if Emmanuel, you are in Kitale, we would love to hear that your disciples are around Kitale. Because then that is when it will become practical. Yeah. But if you say, okay guys, I'm looking for transport, I've just sent a budget for my mission trip, and we're like, so where are you going? I'm going to Lodwar. And we're like, okay, you're going to Lodwar. Will you be going every week? Because when you're discipling them, they need to be discipled.
Close contact.
Yeah. So unless you're saying, oh, I'm going to meet a friend who will disciple people there, then that makes sense. So that's why I'm saying that if the concept is a biblical concept, but again, one thing that is also a challenge, I'm always looking at Emmanuel and these young guys to help me because they understand their generation. Another thing that is the progression of the biblical culture. Progression of the Bible is not static.
Right.
The Bible is not static. There was a time they would marry many wives. There was a time they're not marrying many wives. There was a time they needed bulls and pigeons. There's a time they didn't need that. There's a time Mary could not, and you were not supposed to put on trousers. And then now you do, we don't mind it. So this generation is also questioning that point of change. that something changed without any direct written statement, and that affects a written statement. For example, women should not put on blouse. It's written, it's clear. Then it is the knowledge and wisdom that changed, that now you can do that, but no written correction. Like the way we are doing BBI. We have to write that amendment.
And then
that now women can now put on this. Then you do, right? And when you explain it,
and we judge it in accordance to what is written.
Yes.
But again, we don't also judge the
on
time
what was
span.
yes.
Time
You have
span.
to, the culture
Yes.
at the time it was written.
Yeah.
Context.
Yeah. So they would argue the house church made sense then because the house was the simplest and still was the most complex meeting spaces then. So when you say that it has to be a house, what do you mean in a current cultural context? Because a house means many things. A house can be, guys, I have an office. It's mine. You guys can meet there. Or guys, I want to have a house church, but I don't have a house.
But
So that if we are presenting this to the younger generation, we have to be ready for the questions they're gonna ask.
But also, the term house church, another term is simple church that I've heard called house church. It's interchangeable simple church. But correct me, my understanding is, as far as like teaching the foundational things, the difference, it's not being in a house. You could be wherever.
Yeah.
It's not that. If you want to call it simple church in order to take that term out of it so it's out of people's minds, I mean, to me that sounds logical. If the people you're working with would deal with simple church better, but it's the goal of that simple church. The goal is discipling nations.
Yeah.
And also that it is, traditional church is more the hierarchy of a pastor, and then you filter down to the people.
Yeah.
Whereas with simple church, all of the people are the priesthood, who you're a priest, you're a priest, you're a priest. Everybody has that responsibility on them to go out with the goal in mind of discipling the nations and also discipling each other.
Yeah.
So that's a mindset that's within that group. So I think if it's started out with that, and maybe take the word house out of it if that's a stumbling block, but the difference to me in my mind is the goal and the structure of it. It's not necessarily a place or and the part about the relational, what'd you call it? I'm sorry, the relationships.
Yeah,
That to me, practical fellowship.
Discipleship.
Right, that goes along with the discipleship part of discipling each other so we can get ready and go out. It's not discipling each other so we can just hang out and have a social club and keep, oh girl, let me tell you about my problem.